I feel like a lot of times people use the analogy of like, well, everybody's got a seat at the table. If somebody doesn't show up and fill that seat, that's on them. But I beg to differ. I beg to ask the question, like, why? Why did they not show up and fill that seat? Is it that they feel maybe it's unsafe for them? Maybe that they feel like they can't truly come in and collaborate because they don't truly feel like they belong, right? So I really feel like the belonging element to that should be given its rightful recognition. So many of you know me, but many do not. I'm Adrian Reyes. I previously worked here at GAR on staff. I worked here for 5.5 years. And while I was working here, a lot of people didn't realize this, but I was actually previously a licensed realtor. So I actually was licensed from 2005 to 2008. And we all know what happened then. You can understand why I took a little hiatus from the industry. Came back in 2017 to work for the association here at GAR and kind of worked my way through many different departments here at the association. My final roles were I worked in the MLS department. I was a support coordinator, and I was also the training administrator for GAR, so handling the new member orientation. Just 2 months ago, actually, almost exactly 2 months ago, I decided to leave GAR. Wanted to go out and see what other opportunities there were. Took a position with Keller Williams, the Academy office, and I am the director of technology for them. I am also a liaison for their tech committee and, of course, their DEI committee. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Here in the studio with me are three incredible human beings. I'm going to give each one of them an opportunity to introduce themselves, starting with Ms. Nicole Rogers, who is joining us out of the City of Albuquerque's Office of Black Community Engagement. Nicole, would you mind sharing a bit of your background and what brings you here with us today?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody that's watching. So I have the honor of serving as the mayor's liaison for the Black community. So I run, as you said, the Office of Black Community Engagement. It's a fairly new office, just about 2 years. April was 2 years. And my primary goal is really just to make sure that my community has access to all of the things available through the city of Albuquerque. And so I just love what you said about belonging, because that is definitely a step up from inclusion. Which to me, inclusion is you're invited to the table, right? But don't move the furniture, don't have any ideas, don't try to change anything, you just get to be here. So the belonging means I have a say in how things are run and how we engage together. So I just love that, and I'm here because I'm passionate about home ownership and closing the racial wealth gap. We're working on a big home ownership program for the Black community because the data is pretty dismal for my community. If we don't do anything right now, we'll only add 2,289 new Black homeowners between now and 2040.
Wow.
I'll say that again.
That's crazy.
2,289 Black homeowners between now and 2040 if we do nothing else. And so for me, this is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm just so glad that the ABCD committee is here and doing these types of important conversations.
Absolutely. Wow. That's astounding. I don't even know what to say to that. That's an incredible figure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Next up, we have Mrs. Nee Herrera, a loan officer with Primary Residential Mortgage. Nee, would you mind sharing a bit of your background and what brings you here today?
Yes, so thank you for having me here. So I am born and raised here in Albuquerque. I'm local, but my parents are actually from Vietnam. So I grew up as a non-English speaking child taking ESL classes in the International District. So I got a little confused with Spanish mixed in there when I was trying to learn English. So I have a pretty unique perspective because I got to see my parents kind of struggle as these Vietnamese immigrants who didn't know the language, a lot of the barriers that they had with home ownership. To this day, my mom is like, I have no idea how I bought a house. The realtor just kind of did everything. I don't know what I was doing. So when I became a lender, I also now have a new unique perspective, and now I can kind of see how these people are really underserved just because of this language barrier that has a lot to do with these biases that we have. So I'm really excited to have the conversations with you guys today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for sharing. And last but certainly not least, we have fellow realtor and housing consultant Miss Charla Parsons, who is with Keller Williams out of the Academy office. And Charla, could you share a bit of your background and what brings you here today?
Sure. I have a really adventurous background. I started in the beginning of time. I was a school teacher at a middle school that serves largely immigrant and refugee population out of East Dallas. And I took some time off to have kids. When I came back, I got into political campaign management and working within community organizing. I did a lot of work not in Albuquerque, not in the I-25, I-40 corridors, but outside in the more rural communities, and learned a ton about how our actions are really based around who's the loudest and who has the most money. So from that, I got my real estate license somewhere in between there and didn't practice very heavily. And when I did start practicing, I really noticed that, again, the conversation is really around profit and how we can serve the people who are already becoming homeowners, who already have the means to be homeowners. So 3 years ago, we started the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee at Keller Williams. And that was awesome. It was a slow start, but we've built up now, and we're doing a lot of awesome things there. And then last year, Adrian approached me and several other people about founding our Advancing Belonging Community Diversity committee. During that time also, I've been doing some consulting for the city of Albuquerque and affordable housing. We work in coalition with tons of nonprofits, organizations, things like that. So my personal goal is to help create affordable housing and amplify the voices of people who do not right now have the resources to buy a home or even to rent a home sometimes. And I really think that this work never ends. I think we're going to be doing this work forever and ever, and that's okay with me. I think we can always get better. So I'm super excited to be here today because I want to debunk the idea that talking about our biases is like a negative hush-hush thing, and get people excited about knowing themselves and really becoming the best person and the best realtor and the best community member that they can be. So thanks so much for having me here today.
I love that. And thank you for saying that. Like, this is a difficult conversation to have, right? So why is it difficult? It plays on people's reflections of how they see themselves, right? There's a lot of anxiety that is felt with regards to even the idea of having these biases, right? Because biases are at their core, and we'll discuss this, but they are kind of a contradiction of who you may be at your core, right? So I'm going to ask, like, everybody that's watching this, and please chime into the chat if you have questions or anything like that. But please lean into that anxiety, right? Avoidance is definitely not going to help. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help your clients. It's not going to help your business. It's not going to help us grow as a community or a culture. So really try to lean into that anxiety and really listen to the things that we talk about today, and try to practice a little bit of this. So with that being said, I'm just going to get this conversation started off. What is unconscious bias? And Nicole, I'm gonna hand it to you first. What is unconscious bias in your words?
Sure. Well, before I start, I just want everybody to just take a deep breath and understand that biases are what make us human. Like, we're supposed to keep ourselves safe, notice differences, right? That maybe back in the caveman days, kept us safe. But what the difference is using those stereotypes. Really, a bias is just your believed stereotypes, and the unconscious part of it is you don't know, you're not conscious that it's happening. So think of breathing, for instance. That's an unconscious process that we go through that we don't have to think about. These unconscious biases, unconscious stereotypes are the exact same thing. They're rooted in what society's taught you to believe about a particular group, your experiences, how you were raised, your own culture. All of those things are innate in us. So it doesn't, because you have these, it doesn't make you a racist, right? But if you use those biases to treat people differently, then that's when the problem comes out, right? Is that it's really knowing your biases, it just brings those things to the forefront, to your conscious mind, so that you can guard against them. You can guard against treating people differently because of a stereotype that you believe. That way you're not harming people. You're not harming your clients when you're there to help them, right? And that happens in your line of work. And so really it's stereotypes that you think and believe about a person or a particular group that you're not aware of because it's just unconscious. It happens without you even thinking about it or knowing it. And so the work is all about knowing what those are for you, being honest with yourself about those, and then guarding against them so that you don't cause harm.
Yeah.
I love that.
I feel like not knowing puts us in a situation where we're not only harming ourselves, but we're harming our business, right? So if we're not aware that maybe we have a bias against gay people or black people or whatever, we may be unconsciously keeping away from these people and not even realizing A, that we're doing it, or B, like why and how it could be hurting an entire population. And then when we just take the time to know, like you said, we have the opportunity to purposefully and consciously go into that place, right? Yeah.
Like fully serve them. I think it's interesting because with lending, right, you talked about how it's there to protect us. As lenders, our job is to assess risk. So sometimes it's like it's already part of the job. On top of that, if you have these unconscious biases, it makes the job even more difficult. So really discovering them is really, really important. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. So on the screen, as we can see, who has these biases? It's been mentioned we all have them, right? We all have the biases, including employees, clients, customers, and business associates. Becoming aware of these biases can lead to changing behavior, which ultimately can make your business more collaborative, inclusive, and competitive, right? Which is what all the realtors tuning into, and maybe even the affiliates as well that are tuning in. That means a lot to them, right? Because this is their livelihood. I love the examples that you all gave. I was actually listening to a TEDx earlier. I don't remember if it was this morning or yesterday. But they talked about like how a lot of times your behaviors don't match your core beliefs, right? And you mentioned that. For like a great example that I took away was like the example of a police officer, right? Police officer, they do it because they want to protect and serve, right? That is that core belief, right? But a police officer who is maybe leading their precinct in maybe pulling people over and doing like frisks of, maybe they're leading in that they're doing it with people of color. That goes directly against that core belief of protecting and serving, right? So those two things don't exactly match up. Who are they protecting and serving? So that is just an example of where these biases can live. It's not something that we intend upon. It's not something that we're doing intentionally to harm anybody, right? So a lot of times it is subconscious, it is well below the surface, and it is something that we need to be aware of.
There's a big difference between impact and intent. Right? Like your intent may not to be to cause harm because of your biases, but the truth is you've caused harm.
Right.
And so your intent doesn't make me feel any better about how you impacted my life. So really be very intentional, because that is, I think, what will set you apart is knowing the difference between impact and intent. And it doesn't make it any better that you didn't intend to. You still impacted especially in the with real estate professionals. Sorry, always get that. Your biases can affect someone getting a home.
Yeah.
Everybody, if you believe that housing is a human right, everybody should have a safe place to live, then your biases have no place in your work.
And not only can affect getting a home, but do affect getting a home. If you have not seen the snapshot, it's from the NAR, snapshot of race and homeownership. It is an astounding report that's come out for several years now. And it really does a great job of showing this is who can afford a home in every, each of the different communities versus this is who actually owns a home. And the gap between in the Black community, for example, of folks who can afford to own a home but don't is like 13% or something like that. And it's like, we can go into this later or now, but why is it that there's such a large group of people that can afford to buy a home but are not? I know that I'm in my office every single day. I see people making those phone calls. Why are they not at the other end of that phone call? Yeah. And, you have to dig in to say, I don't really think it's the intent. I don't think that it's somebody saying, oh, I only think white people should own homes. I think it's our bias at play. And I think that's when we're like, oh, we have to do something about this.
Yeah, and these biases definitely have a legitimate impact in our community, right? I mean, there was a recent, not too recent, it's been the past like 2 or 3 years, that Long Island Divide, right, where there was a project where they sent out a bunch of testers into Long Island. It was like 90 some testers that went out and tested a whole bunch of realtors there, right? And they came back with all of this data showing that biases were incredibly at play when these realtors were doing their work, right? There's also and I'll put it up on the screen real quick. We're not going to play it, but there was and I don't even think it's going to play if we could, but there was another one that's specific to appraisals, right? That where this couple in, I believe it's in California, Marin, where they actually went and had to consider getting another appraisal done after they whitewashed their home to see what the difference was, and it was like $500,000.
And let's be real. All of the realtors that are listening, that this is a thing. I had realtors when advising me to make sure I took down the Obama plate in my house or all of these things to get a better home valuation. And we know that in the Black community, it's estimated over the last 10 years, we've lost $256 billion in low home valuations. And this doesn't just happen everywhere else. It happens here. I get calls about it in my office all the time about this happening right here in Albuquerque. And if you look at the data of appraisers in this country, 90% of them are white. 90%. So that's one of our strategies for our homeownership is we get more apprentices going for appraisers that are appraisers of color to have a long-term impact on my ability or my community's ability to build wealth. Like that's a huge amount of money that's taken right out of families. Our ability to send our kids to college, our ability to start a business using our equity in our home. There's all kinds of things that we aren't able to have access to because of biases in, and those are all rooted in like, they don't take care of their houses or, whatever the bias is in your brain of what you make up about my community, it amounts to dollars out of our pocket. And that's just not acceptable.
And not to mention, I think appraisal, that's a great career. And we should be, and when we're thinking about the bias, it can't just be on the case of our clients, but like owning your home and owning a business are the two best ways to build wealth. Absolutely. So just sticking that in there. And on the positive side, I think it's a good practice for everybody, for every realtor, no matter what kind of person you are when you're selling your house or when you're doing, I see up on the screen, marketing and social media content is a place where we could see bias. We want to see, everybody should depersonalize their homes, not just because of biases, but because you want your buyers to come in and be able to see themselves there and to feel free, no matter who they are, to come in and imagine themselves and their families relaxing and feeling free in that space, right? So that's like the opposite. And then in terms of marketing, there's tons, you get on Canva, there's tons of, you need to be cognizant of what your marketing is saying. So make sure, if you go to my page, you either see a lot of houses without any people at all. If you're not ready to put different communities of people on your content, that's fine. Then do no people, right? Then do houses. I love how mine has a lot of house plants and like diverse plants and whatever, it's art, but make sure that your marketing is not all of one type of person, usually the people that look like yourself, right?
Right.
Because that
Which is
speaks to your
one of the
clients.
19 biases, right?
One of the very many.
The familiarity bias, right? That says I do business with, I have friends that are like me, and that is a bias. That's an unconscious bias that is real and researched and is absolutely fact. And that if you don't realize that or don't know that, that's something that hopefully can help you bring it to your conscious mind so you can be guard against that.
Yeah, it's like that birds of the same feather flock together, right? But I think for us, our whole point in what we're doing professionally is to serve others, not just others of the same feather. So recognizing and talking about some of these biases, it's really, really important.
Yeah, and like the marketing, like you said, it goes back to belonging. If I'm looking for a realtor and I go to your website and I don't see myself reflected, that's one of my things that I want to see myself reflected in who I'm going to do business with. And so marketing is important. What you're portraying as far as the customers you want to help definitely is it either sets up belonging or doesn't.
And not just race, but right, we're talking about age, we're
Absolutely.
talking about
Yes.
sexual orientation, we're talking about
Disabilities.
gender, we're talking about disabilities, physical and mental, all of the things. Like, there really are a lot of great, and it's more beautiful, if you ask me. It's more representative of what our real communities look like.
Right.
Like, make your social media and your marketing look real. Like,
Absolutely. This reminds me of a quote from Marion Wright Edelman. We cannot be what we cannot see. Right? That really resonates with me. Like, if my kids are growing up and they're bombarded with marketing on everything, how our society is marketing for anything and everything around them, if they don't see themselves reflected in those images, they cannot be what they cannot see.
yeah.
Representation matters.
It absolutely matters.
Maybe that goes back to what you were saying, Nicole, with the Black ownership. And if everything stays the same, it's maybe because they can't see them owning a home.
And that's been the biggest, I think, for me, thing I learned in doing this project is for my community, the half of the work is getting people to believe they can do it. Because we don't feel like we've been left out of this industry for so many generations. We have generations and generations of people who are not homeowners. And if you walk around and you don't see any Black realtors, I know you're out there because we're getting a list together so that we can use, so we have representation in our program. If you're a Black escrow person, we need you, right? Lenders, appraisers, we want every step of the way for people to see folks that look like us, because then it's easier. We don't have to, those distrust barriers are high for us because we have been left out, and not just Black community. I mean, we know the data in New Mexico is the Black and Native communities are suffering from housing instability at the highest rate. That is just the truth. And doesn't mean we want anything special or anything that others aren't already getting. We just want access, equitable access to the same opportunities that your family has when it comes to homeownership.
Yeah.
I think when I hear you talking about this, I'm like, yes. And then I'm also, part of me is like, wait, I want to serve you too. I want to serve the Black community. And I want to make sure that everybody out there, a lot of these realtors, I'm sure, are feeling like, how can I make sure that I'm really, truly able to serve the Black community, the Asian community, the Native community, the whoever community? And I think that's what this conversation is about, right? Like, I found myself, I know we're going to talk about this later, but I found myself taking the unconscious bias test. And I was talking this about Nicole yesterday, and I was like, you'll find, we're going to put the link here in the chat of some bias tests you can take. And there's all different ones. You can take one on gender, you can take one on race, all of the things, like 12 or something. There's a million out there, but on this specific link. And I took the one on race because I'm the chair of ABCD, right? Like, I'm awesome. No, you guys, I found myself, like, I was, like, cheating on the test. I'm like, no, I feel perfectly comfortable. And I push that button, and I'm like, oh, no, I have to go back and retake it because the reality is, if I'm not being honest and saying, yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable and I'm not sure why, but whatever, I'm a little uncomfortable, so I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to, I'm going to push the button that's real. It's going to get me to the place where it says, you have a tiny bias against the Black community. And then I get to know, okay, then my familiarity bias, I was raised around white people, I was raised around Native people and Hispanic people, Mexican people to be specific. I was not raised around a whole lot of Black people. So that means now, knowing my bias, I need to change that familiarity bias. I need to get myself into the Black community more often. So, for instance, I've signed up to be a volunteer at Juneteenth. I have told Nicole that I want to help at the Office of Black Engagement, right? Like, I do this work because it's a little uncomfortable, and I want to get to the place where you're forced to talk about it. So join our committee. If you're a little uncomfortable, join our committee, because this is the place where you get to talk and be honest and not be uncomfortable anymore.
Yeah. And just to preface, this test is done by Harvard.
Yeah.
Okay, they have researched this. They've been doing this for years. So for those scientific people, data people out there, don't debunk it. Like, it is seriously, it will bring your biases to your forefront.
Oh, it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I'm uncomfortable right now. I just said that
Yes.
to Olive Garden.
Yeah.
But
And how
if we can't
brave.
say it, then we have to say it.
Absolutely, and that's why this racism is so insidious, right? Is there's a code of secrecy to this that doesn't allow us to have open, honest conversations about race, and that's really the work. That's a lot of the work we do in equity and inclusion at the city, is just normalizing these kind of conversations so they're not so scary. And it takes bravery to be able to do that and to admit your bias. I won't leave you out there by yourself. I got a bias too. I'll share one of my biases. For me, I definitely have a couple of biases. And even me doing equity work, I was super shocked. Like, oh my God, me? I'm Black, Hispanic, a woman? Like, I have them too, okay? And mine was specifically around people I don't think are as smart as me, right? It's really hard for me to take your advice if I don't see you running your life well. Like, you're not going to come and tell me what I should be doing with my life. If I perceive, right, that you're not where you need to be, then I dismiss your advice, your feedback, when of course we can learn from everybody. But that is one of my biases. And in managing people, I really have to watch that, right? Because one of my best mentors told me, don't measure other people by your yardstick. Like, that is your bias. So don't measure other people by your own yardstick. They're never going to measure up. I was like, dang.
That's a good one.
So true. Right? And so you have to be honest about those. And then now that I know, of course, you're going to have those, you're going to go through all the stages of grief.
It's so embarrassing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
You're going to get mad. You're going to be like, this test is
That's
dumb.
not me.
This isn't me. How's the computer going to tell me? Right? Then you're going to be grieving. Like, man, is that really in me? Like, oh, because nobody wants to be labeled something like that.
Negative,
Like, right?
anything.
Negative,
Right.
right. But be honest with yourself. If you can't be honest with yourself,
And then you take action.
Yes,
And then you're
you
like,
take
oh
action.
man, okay, let's go.
yeah.
Yeah,
And what
that's
I
how we
like about
challenge
what
it.
you said is you're not like, oh, I'm going to go get a Black friend. Like, you're right, that's going to seem weird and disingenuous. Like, right? So there's a way to do it. Like you said, getting involved. Show up to the Juneteenth event. It's an open event.
Yeah.
You can go hang out, just engulf yourself in our amazing culture, because, come on. I mean, it is amazing.
It is fun. Juneteenth is fun.
It's so fun, and it's a way, a safe place for you to actually immerse yourself in the culture. But please, if you're not what's the word? Kind, then don't come. Because we don't want that mess either at Juneteenth. This is our celebration.
Nee, you talked about the other day about, sorry to moderate, I don't mean to, but
no.
you were talking about name bias, and it like stuck with me. I've been thinking about it. Would you mind?
Yes. Well, a lot of lending is a little bit hard because, it's just based off of the name. In my own experience, I recently got married, and my maiden name is Nying Wing. I actually used to change the way that I pronounced my name just so that people could say it correctly. So I used to say Nhi Nguyen, and I still do sometimes. So when I got married, Herrera is my new last name, and I had a really serious internal struggle of, do I change my last name or do I keep my maiden name? And it wasn't because of anything other than my business. It was because I was afraid if I changed my name, if I kept my name, if people didn't recognize it, would they call me as a lender? And all you realtors, you guys give your list of 3, right? So I was always afraid, if I'm on that list and there's somebody that has a very easy to pronounce name, they're going to just naturally be called first because that client may have a bias towards my name.
Yeah.
And then I experienced it, in real life where somebody did tell me that they didn't expect my name to be called just because of the way that it was.
So it makes me think, just for the realtors that are watching, like, I don't have a name bias, right? Or if I don't have a name bias, fine. We have to look at other people's biases and help them, right? So now I think a responsibility of all of us realtors that are watching are to learn how to say our lenders' names properly and then teach our potential clients that. So, hey, Buyer Bob, these are my 3 favorite lenders, and this is how they pronounce their name. And, maybe even if they have a gender neutral name, you let them know she's a she, so this is, and she's fantastic, and she's blah, 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 so that you sort of play with, if you have any kind of name bias, Buyer Bob, this is how you say their name, and they're amazing, so work past your bias and call them anyway, because it's a hard business to be a lender and try and if you know that lender's a hardworking, caring person, then we owe it as realtors to help them get the business that they deserve, especially people who have names that we can't pronounce as easily in your own culture.
Because that has nothing to do with my ability to be able to get your loan closed, right?
He's a rockin' lender.
Yeah.
Well, but name bias is based on what? Racist bias. That's an ethnic name, right? Even the Black community, we had Raven Simone on The View say, "I wouldn't hire you if you have a really Black name," right? So the name bias is, let's be real, it's rooted in who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of it. It's not just I'm going around randomly not liking names.
Yeah.
It's tied to a culture that you have a bias against.
At the same, you talked about the accent bias,
Oh,
and I think it's on
yes.
Harvard. There's an accent bias that people
It's
have.
huge. It's huge. It drives me insane. Please don't do it. Where somebody that has an accent and you start speaking louder, like they're deaf,
Yeah.
right? Like that is just rude. And
Here, do you need help?
yes, like, and there's ways to help yourself with that. Go on YouTube, listen to some accents, and get fluent in
Familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a state that one of our languages is Spanish in our Constitution. Like, there are so many languages spoken in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
We have a immigrant and refugee liaison at the city her job is language access, and there's some real deep things. People deserve to have whatever it is they're doing, especially big transactions like buying a home, getting health care, dealing with police. They should be able to have that in the language that they can best understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period.
Not having it go to their 14-year-old kid, which I hear happens so often. I'm like, that just makes me cringe. I'm like, no, that poor kid.
Before I came to the city, I worked in healthcare, and we would have we literally had a provider that asked a 14-year-old to turn around and tell his Spanish-speaking mother that she had cancer. Like that, like, who thinks that that's appropriate for any language? English, Spanish, Vietnamese, it doesn't matter. You should never ask a child, do they even know what cancer is? Like, or it blows my mind.
Or escrow? Do they know what escrow is?
Right.
I've seen, translations with a teenager in a closing. It's
Right.
just not okay. No. I think one of the things I wanted to make sure that we clarify is that familiarity bias does not mean that it necessarily things and people that look like you. It means it's things and people that look like what you grew up with, right? So if I happen to grow up in a Black community and I was just the lone white family in a Black community, then my familiarity bias would be the micro communities within the Black community, right? And that happens all the time, right? In places that have a larger Black community or a Black population than New Mexico, it happens all the time. Your familiarity bias is going to be with what you're familiar with seeing out of your eyeballs, not what you're familiar with feeling like and in your skin. Usually that coincides with what you look like yourself, but it's not always. So think about yourself and, like, who were you raised around, and, like, does that possibly play with like who you're normally targeting in real estate.
There's a great exercise for that. You could literally, we did this in our office. A shout out to our culture change leader, Tim Green, at the city. He had us do a circle of trust. And you're to write down 10 people that you trust. Just don't even think about it, unconscious, right? Just write down 10 people you trust. And then look at that makeup of that list. You know, are they all white? Or are there no white people on that list, right? Or are there people of different ages? Are there people of different languages? Are there people of different, you know, obviously disabilities aren't always visible, right? But there could be people with mental health that's a disability. Think about that list and really map out who those are. Assign numbers. Your first is like your inner circle all the way to number 3, and you'll see for yourself who is in your circle and what you need to do to broaden that. Because as a matter of fact, broadening your circle in your real estate business only helps you be more competitive, like Adrienne said, and more profitable.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So before we get into the next question, I did want to just kind of point out the types of unconscious bias have been on the screen. That link at the bottom, if you go to that link, and I think David did share it also in the chat, but if you go to that link, what I love about that, and I spent some time kind of nerding out on that page, is that it does give you recommendations on how to protect or guard against your biases on there, which I really, really love that.
Yeah.
So going on to our next question, where do you generally see bias in the workplace? And Nee, I'm gonna direct this one to you first.
Yes. So I think, well, being a Vietnamese bilingual lender, I do see it on the front lines, right? So there's a lot of bias where I've had Vietnamese speaking clients who used to work with the realtor, and then the realtor just kind of like ditched them and they haven't heard back, and there wasn't even a care to kind of refer them over to a Vietnamese speaking or find them. It was just, hey, I don't know, it's going to be a lot of work to be your realtor, I'm just going to X you out. Also within what I do, documents, there's nothing in Vietnamese, and that if I am just one part of a community, we're not talking about Tagalog, we're not talking about any other languages out there. But in Vietnamese, they don't understand what they're signing. And a lot of times at closing, I am just translating it for them. And I am not an escrow officer. You know, I like to stick in my lane too. I'm not a realtor. So I see it all the time in the workplace where people don't really want to give the best service just because maybe, one, it's just a lot of work, or two, they just don't know how to serve them. And I think that comes with just providing more resources, recognizing that somebody else can help them better, and then just doing your best, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Charlotte, do you want to add to that?
Well, I just was thinking as you said that, like, providing more resources is sometimes easier said than done, right? So, like, one of the things that we're really trying to do within ABCD is we have a community resources subcommittee, and a lot of really awesome, hardworking people on that committee who are trying to basically create those resources and make sure that if they exist, that we're putting them in one place. I know that Abby on our committee has been doing a lot to put events together, and we need all of the forms in all of the different languages. We need a list of all of the realtors who speak all the escrow officers, all the inspectors, all of the title, anybody. And so those resources, I get it. If you are listening to Nee and you're saying like, great, that's great, but like, what are the resources and how do I even get them? Like, we're working on it, and and we need help. So, right, again, like, this work never ends. So like, if you feel that way, then come help us, because we're trying.
Yeah, basically trying to create a central database for all of these resources that we could even think of, and collaborating with other entities as well, like especially like the city, who's full of resources. If we can have all of that centralized, and we can all go to that central place and be like, well, I have a a buyer who speaks Tagalog, right? And so I need somebody that can translate.
I think that makes another good point, which is that we have this, I mean, I don't know if it's a bias, but like a fear about, well, if for instance, I do not know a single word of Vietnamese. So if I knew somebody that spoke Vietnamese and needed a home, like, my first instinct is probably going to be, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
but that's terrible. Like, what I should have is a good network of awesome Vietnamese realtors that I can refer to in the knowledge that we're working on closing the racial wealth gap. The Asian people were left out of buying homes before fair housing as well. And so we owe it to the Asian community, or the Vietnamese community specifically in this example, to have a list of realtors who speak Spanish, who speak Vietnamese, who speak Dene, who speak whatever, to be able to say, and guess what? It's a referral, people. Like, you still make money off of that. So great.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other places, thinking of the real estate agents, is one of the things I always cringe is, and I know that this is a standard practice, but I think this leaves open the ability for biases to color decisions. And I know it's a seller's market right now, right? Like, sellers
That's right.
have all of the control and power in this situation. So when a realtor says, okay, here are your 3 offers, why do we put source of income on that document for the people to choose from? Why do we tell them this one's a FHA, first time home buyer, this
Right.
one's a cash offer? Because, I mean, what are they going to pick?
Yeah, of course.
Right? And that's a family has means to pay cash for their home,
Right.
and you've just taken away that opportunity from that first time home buyer that could be a single mom like me. Money is money, right? But so why is that a standard practice that we do, right? That's a just straight up, I'm going to choose who has the means to pay me cash because I don't want to. Why? As the seller, you're going to get paid either way.
Yep. Our committee
Right?
member Lauren Sandoval talked about this on our other first Wednesday bias, or not bias class. Hello. And yeah,
That's a
that's
big
definitely
one.
a conversation that's had. Another thing is that, so like, I found out on my heart, I'm going to say things out loud that are embarrassing. I found out that I have a gender bias. I found this out years ago, and I'm aware of it now. So knowing that I have a gender bias, I can't put the names on my list when I'm doing offers, and yeah, I can talk about that more later. But you're right; like, we see it all the time.
And really, it's just encouraging your sellers, your clients, to also have the same bias.
Yeah.
So it's really our duty to.
So why don't we just be radical, Gar, and take it off?
So I'm glad that you actually went there, Charlotte, because I'm just going to skip over to another question where we can address that directly.
Yeah.
So what are your strengths or strategies for recognizing and overcoming unconscious bias? I know you were kind of headed there.
Yeah, so I've been sort of alluding to it, I think, with everything that I say, but I found, for a lot of time of my life, I leaned away from, because it's embarrassing and it's scary, but leaning in, I brought up briefly the example about the gender thing. I think when we're offering, I create a spreadsheet, right, for my sellers. Just yesterday, I had a seller, and even before hitting the market, we're in coming soon, I had 3 offers, by the way. So yeah, it's a seller's market, and it's a lot. Anyway, I know I have a gender bias. And so I can see when I make that list of offers and I say, all right, we have Sonia, and we have Jack, and we have Bobby. Okay. My bias, I know, is going to tell me, go, Sonia, go. She's going to win it, right? And so knowing that, I create my files, and I call them offer 1, offer 2, offer 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. And I purposefully scan through really quickly on page 4 where it says the name, right? Or page 1 of, yeah. And I put all of the terms, I put, their net out, I create their whatever to have to go with it, so that when I'm going, and then I shuffle them. And then I purposefully shuffle them so that when I'm going through the offers with my client, I don't have that bias. Because if I don't know about it, I may be prey to accidentally push my client. And the other thing there, if you have to remember, is I'm not serving my seller. I'm not serving my seller to the best of the ability. And you're making me realize that I need to hide the source of income unless it's really needed. If we get to the end and I'm like, we have nothing left, they're all the same, and this is all we have to think about, then we can start adding in those things. But you're right, people have a bias against poor people, and they will assume that if you have an FHA loan or an MFA assistance, that you're going to be, it's not going to be as dependable, which
Right.
just like Lauren
Right.
talked about, it's not real.
And for the seller, like that's not a, it's not a consideration. They're going to get paid either way.
Yeah.
And I think you're also guarding against biases of your clients, right? By doing that. What if I mean, when I was buying a house, I lost a bid because the seller was a firefighter and they found out one of the buyers was a firefighter, or one of the offers was from a firefighter. I'm automatically out.
Yeah.
Right, because of that familiarity. Oh, it's another firefighter, the brotherhood, your sisterhood. Yeah, let's. Right, but I lost out on that because I was like, but my grandpa was the state fire marshal.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
can you tell them that? Like, I didn't know that was relevant to buying a home.
Yeah.
Right, and so even those types of biases, your client may have them too, and you're helping them guard against things they might not even be aware of.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move on to our last question. How do you find discovering our unconscious bias can bring success in the housing industry? I'm going to say, which one of you wants to take the last question first?
I can start it. So for success in the housing industry as a lender, it just really means that everybody has an equal opportunity to achieve home ownership, right? So regardless of demographics or anything like that, like your name. So by discovering, really you're able to kind of challenge and guard against, like you said, Adrian. You're able to do two things that just keeps kind of coming up in the conversation here. One, you're able to help better serve your community, which is our job, regardless of why you're in real estate as a lender, broker, appraiser. But two, to make more money, to make a living, right? By being able to say yes to a more diverse group of people, we're going to be able to help them buy homes, help them, and also make money for us. So it's like a 2-in-1. There's a lot in the industry that I feel like once you start recognizing that there are biases, you'll start seeing that, they're rooted in the systems as well.
Totally, especially housing.
Right, especially with housing. Different things like the LLPAs. I don't know if that's one that we want to touch on now, but so LLPAs just basically are loan level pricing adjustments. They're basically risks, fees added on that are borrower specific, and it's based off of risk assessed, which we're not going to be able to get rid of completely. Like I said, lenders, our job is to assess risk. Our job is to see that our experience with this type of a borrower will or will not pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars. So these new LLPAs, if you see on the screen, green means that it's better pricing. Red means that it's worse pricing. And there's two ways to look at it. Negatively, there is a small group right there in the center that have a decent credit score who have, 20-25% to put down. They do have a little bit of a higher pricing now. They still have the option to go green by putting less down. But really, if you want to look at it positively, it's focusing on the people with less than a 679 credit score and less than 5% to put down. They now have less risks added on to their loan, so less fees, actually, I should say. Primarily, who are these borrowers who have less than a 679 and less than 5%? They're people in they're minority groups, right? Blacks, Hispanics, first-time buyers, younger buyers who don't have a long credit history length, don't have a lot of money to put down, the ones that are using MFA assistance, down payment assistance. So I feel like there's different ways to look at it. I think that once you recognize the biases, you can see that there are things that we can do to help these certain groups, right? Which is everything that you're doing on the forefront.
So the key word is and. It would be low credit score and little money down. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah. So it's that green, so that everything on the bottom tier, those first 3 rows right there is less than 679, and then if you look over, it's from 3% to 5% down. So it's really that low credit score, and they don't have a lot to put down. A lot of the minority groups, as a lender, that's what I see, and first-time buyers that are young.
So there's a lot of chatter on this, especially in the realtor world. I'm hearing a lot of negative, a lot of the sky is falling type things going on. LLPAs are not new.
No,
right?
They've been around. We add them on for things like investment properties. That's why you'll hear investment properties have higher pricing. That's why we tell you rates depend, because it depends on your credit score, how much you're putting down. So LLPAs have been around for a long time. It's just now there's just this new change, and it does negatively affect, that 740 credit score that has 20% to put down. their pricing is a little bit worse. They could put less down and their pricing is still better than it used to be, though. The thing is, for those groups, they had options.
Right.
You know, this
fine.
this heat map shows that if you were at the bottom tier and you had not a lot to put down and you didn't have very good credit, you had really no options. It was just going to be more expensive, and we were probably just going to put you in an FHA loan, which then got into, well, what happens once the offer goes out? I remember as a lender, especially when it was really crazy last year, we did everything we could to try to put our clients in a conventional loan because the sellers will see cash, conventional, FHA. Our buyers were hardworking, you know, they were trying to achieve home ownership, and we were trying to put them into this box just so that their chances of getting their offer accepted were higher.
I
This
like that you
gives
said
options.
that they're hardworking, because a lot of what I'm seeing in social media, and I know social media is not a great resource, but a lot of what I'm seeing as feedback from realtors is that association of work ethic
Yeah.
with regards to credit scores.
Yeah.
Like and I know we're talking about bias. That's a perception bias,
It's
right?
such a perception
It's
bias.
such
The
a
credit
perception
game's
bias.
a racket. Come on.
Yes, absolutely. So I
let's
just
be real.
I thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that so much.
And this is a remedy to try to make amends for the hundreds of years that the banking industry has caused harm. Right? And so there has to be a way to course correct. And I feel like this is trying to get at that.
Right. It's not perfect, but we're trying.
Do the
Run banks offering different LLPs.
our
LLPAs.
state-run banks offered, what was it?
Different LLPs.
Offering differing LLPAs.
LLPAs, so this is by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, so conventional loans. Yeah. So they're the ones that kind of set what the LLPAs are based off of risk. So every lender is going to follow that.
Which is federal.
So lenders have to look at their own bias in a different way and really have the, like, I mean, again, this is a purposeful, action-oriented, like, okay, I'm going to put my bias. And even if you have that bias, it's okay. Like, once you realize it, it's going to fizzle out a little because
Yeah.
once you know, and then you can say, well, this is what we're going to do to help you without taking you out of the homeowner's
Right.
realm.
More here. There's a lot of conversation about removing the language from the PA about what type of buyer it is. There's a lot of kickback here going on about VA, FHA repairs.
We have questions from the chat coming in.
Questions, and that trying to level the playing field. So if you want to maybe
So yeah, and so we actually, the questions are coming in with regards to the language in the purchase agreement. This is actually a conversation that we've had in the Advancing Belonging, Community, and Diversity Committee.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and let you guys take this though. How, like, with regards to, like, on the purchase agreement as it states right now, you are defining
Source of income.
Yeah, the source of income, how it's coming in.
Which we've just made that illegal for renters. Like so why would we be doing that for home ownership? Like the city of Albuquerque literally just had legislation passed that said for renters a landlord could not discriminate based on your source of income. So if you're a landlord, you can't say no, I don't take Section 8 or no, I don't take that voucher, right? Like that's illegal here. And so to me it's the same thing we're talking about when I'm a buyer and I can see how the seller is financing the house and I can make a decision based on that. For me, it's I have a very big equity lens, so it's an easy thing to say that we shouldn't do that from an equity standpoint. I know for realtors, you're thinking I'm just helping my buyer make the best decision for them. But the truth is, like, they're going to get paid either way, right?
And then as a lender, we have rules that we have to follow. So there's the Ability to Repay Act, where legally we have to make sure that this borrower is going to be able to pay back this loan at least for the next 5 years. So lending has gotten really, really tight. And we have to make sure the borrower actually qualifies, right? So I kind of feel like if they're getting that pre-qualification and it's a solid lender, they're already doing that work for you. I don't know if the seller may need
Yeah.
to know
that.
that, right?
I think that's though, to be fair, I think that's the key to it is like getting actually pre-qualified. So from the seller's broker standpoint, actually, Yeah, from either standpoint, from the realtor standpoint, it's not a given that it's a cash offer is going to close and you're just going to close in 7 days. You know, they have just the same ability to walk in and decide that that plumbing's not going to work or that whatever, right? And so that, first of all, is a common misconception that like cash, it's going to close, da-da-da. It is, of course, I think, and this doesn't necessarily, I mean, I guess everything has to do with bias, but like when you're working with your clients who don't have cash, doing everything you can, working with lenders who are willing to address the biases and get true pre-qualifications. I have lenders who will put people all the way through the underwriting process before we get under contract and be able to put an offer down with, I've done a 10-day close on a loan. So it's possible, but I have to be willing to actually, and I'd say like going back to the question, this makes it relevant, is how do you find discovering our unconscious bias to bring success in the industry? For me, success in the housing industry is like looking around and seeing a diverse group of homeowners, right? And so if I don't actually want that, if that's not my mission, then going through the trouble of looking for lenders who will help me get in, and not all lenders will do that. It's a lot of work, and I get it, lenders who are out there. Like, it's hard to do a giant amount of work for someone who may never pay you. It's hard for us, too, to write contracts that that very likely will not be accepted, right? But again, if you can find it in yourself for your mission to truly be wanting to see a diverse community of homeowners out there, then you go the extra mile, then you write the offer that's not going to get accepted, then you put your clients through underwriting even though they may never get that loan, because it's the right thing to do, because those biases have been playing against these populations for so long and they deserve it, and it's time for them to get that help. And I think like until you really realize your own self and your own bias, you're not going to have the will, you're not going to want to do that, and you're not going to have the confidence to do that. And it's like taking the veil of its misery off, right? Take off the veil, man, because in the end, you can look around and you have a sense of confidence and freedom that you've never had in your life. And then it's fine. Then you don't need a token black friend to feel like you're not messing up. Like, you just truly want what's best for everyone. And just trust me, my friends out there, take these tests, figure it out for yourself. And we'll talk about the meeting later, but we are going to be talking about this in our meeting this month for ABCD, and creating a space for open dialogue to really digest, okay, well, this is my bias. Whoa, this is embarrassing. What am I supposed to do? Like, we'll be there at Napoli and we'll be there at our meeting. There's going to be a lot of talk and place for you to really process this and figure out what to do.
Another question from the chat.
Yeah, someone's commenting about what about the pick me letter? Because sometimes a new home buyer does need that letter. So
What about the pick me letter?
Like offer letters, you mean?
The love me letters?
So do you want to repeat her question?
So the question was just with regards to addressing the love me letters with offers, because a lot of times buyers feel like they need that. Do any of you want to speak to that?
For those of us that don't know what a pick me letter is, can you tell me what that is?
It's where the buyers write a letter to the seller saying like, I want this house. Thank you so much. I love it. I can't wait to see my kids playing in the backyard, and like, please give me this house.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of times people don't. Oh yeah. Well, we don't often take those. Like when I have a seller, I don't accept offer letters because I know that biases are at play, and I know that every seller has a bias. So like, I know if my seller wants to see children playing in their backyard, then they're very less likely to have a transgender couple or a single man who doesn't have children have that house, because that's their bias, right? So, and it also comes to play with fair housing. Like, there's a lot of lawsuits that can come into play that say, you know, my name is...
I honestly didn't know that they were doing that very
Yeah,
much.
that
When I
seems
bought a
super
home recently, and all my clients, I haven't really seen
Maybe
that.
that's how they knew Homeboy was a firefighter.
Yeah.
This realtor turned one of those in, and mine didn't tell me that was a thing.
Yeah, it's on a listing agreement. When we sign listing agreements, we can choose whether to accept offer letters or not. And I choose no. I think we should be choosing no. But I think it's good
And
that
this
it's
is
on
a
the listing.
standard practice. And
It's very, very rare that people
It is.
accept
It's
offer
rare.
letters.
Okay.
So
I've
yeah.
heard of them. I just didn't know.
So if
that
it's
happened.
rare, then why don't we just take that off the form altogether?
Well, if it's off of the form, then then you'd be in the situation where you'd have
Just
to
get it.
accept them
Oh, okay.
because you'd have nothing that says like I don't accept offer letters. So I'd say for whoever in the chat said that, like I would encourage people to probably steer away from,
Just a conversation.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good
good.
conversation.
That is good
That's
conversation.
good.
I'm learning
Right.
about that.
There's a lot of conversation going on in the chat, and it's
Yeah.
Really, are we here to work for our seller?
yeah.
Maybe our seller.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, that's all.
Right. Thanks for the robust chat.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I
means
think
we're
we'll have more time for the chat too.
Good.
So that is all of the questions, and we are just past 10 o'clock. So this is time for Q&A from the chat. So if there are any more questions, we can definitely entertain those.
The recent lending changes, which you did speak to briefly, but maybe speaking a little bit more, recent lending changes to how rates are given and how that can play into unconscious bias. Do you feel you already covered that?
Yeah, I do feel like with the LLPs.
We're just going through the questions to see.
Also influence?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
You
When
want
it
to
comes
repeat the
Wanna repeat
question?
Yeah, so somebody had a question. Oh, Adrian, I'll let you moderate it.
So I actually didn't hear that. Sorry.
So somebody had a question about the media and all the different changes with rates and what's going on with those LLPAs. I think it's one of the most important things is if we are calm, our clients are calm. So that's the first thing to remember, kind of like how Nicole started this entire thing. If you're feeding into the negativity and scaring them, people are thinking that they should tank their credit scores. It's all over TikTok so that they can get a better interest rate and not get hit with those LLPAs. It's all about education, right? So understanding who it helps that we went over, but also if you don't really know and you're not really sure, call up your favorite lender and have a conversation with them about it. Hey, what does this mean for my buyer? Does it even affect them? I actually had a buyer ask me if it affected them because she saw it on the news. And it doesn't change anything for her because she was going FHA, but here she was thinking rates were worse for her. So it's something to definitely have a conversation about. But if you're calm and collected, your clients will be too. And there's good that comes out of it, I think.
Absolutely. So like I said before, I am seeing a lot of this on social media right now.
Yeah.
And most of what I'm seeing in my feed is realtors, but I have a lot of lenders in my feed as well, obviously. A lot of what the realtors are putting out there with regards to the LLPAs and a lot of what the lenders, well, all of what, I haven't seen any inconsistency with my lender friends, but there is inconsistency between the two. And so I would just like to piggyback on that and say, like, absolutely reach out to your lender friends. Let them handle those types of questions, those types of inquiries, maybe that type of education, because I feel like realtors are really putting out the wrong messaging. Like
Right.
it's really, really negative with regards to all of this. And I think the education is key, and let the professionals handle it.
Yeah. If they were putting 5% down no matter what, it doesn't change a thing. It's better pricing for them now, right? So having your lender have that conversation, it's just all about staying in our own lane, right? Like I'll never call you up and say, hey, how's inspections? What's the ORW process?
Right.
I'm not going to tell you to pick which offer either. So I think it's just all about staying in your lane and just calling up your lender and let them have the conversation. And if you don't have one, call me.
Absolutely. Another question?
How do you respond to the current wave that affirmative action and EEO are no longer needed?
So how do we respond to the
It's up
current?
on the screen.
Oh, thank you. How do you respond to the current wave that the affirmative action and EEO are no longer needed?
This is a big
Nicole.
conversation,
Yeah.
right? That even our Supreme Court is having. You may not know that this is up for debate with our Supreme Court about getting rid of EEO and affirmative action. I think I probably have controversial opinions about this, so I'll be mindful of that. But I think I'd like to see the data on what affirmative action and EEO has how it has actually impacted my community to see what that actually looks like. Because I think it's needed because of the conversation we're having as far as biases, and that's the reason we have that, right? Is because we want to guard against people's bias around hiring, because we know people hire people like them, and so I think those are there to guard against what we're talking about today. So do I think we don't have biases anymore or stereotypes? No. So do I think we should still have these protections? Yes. But I also wonder what's the impact of these protections.
It makes me think, I guess, I don't know anywhere near as much as you do about this, but as you were saying that, I'm like, well, if we were actually diverse and we were actually there, right, where the powerful people were very diverse and you never knew what the person behind the giant executive desk was going to look like, then maybe there's a world where the affirmative action wasn't needed, right? So to me, removing affirmative action at this point is pretending like we are to the place that we wish to be, right? It's playing pretend to say, no, we're diverse, we're good now, so we don't need it anymore. But the reality looks a lot different, and I think you make a good point about, and I don't think it's an attack by or controversial by any means. I think we need data for everything, right? We passed a bill a couple cycles ago adding gender to the census, right? Because we found that people were like, I don't know what the trans people need. Like, I don't know about those people. It's just a community. I don't know. And so we needed the data to be able to say, what do we actually need and what's going on? So I actually really respect what you say about that and say, yeah, like, let's actually take to the data and use the data for that conversation, because I think we'll find that the executive desks are still largely staffed by
white men.
White men.
Let's be real. I mean, and I think this also is
nothing against white men. There's a lot of great white men out there, but we need diversity.
But it doesn't all, like, let's be real. I mean, I love that you talked about the census, because I was heavily involved in the census, and the demographic, whether you like it or not, the demographic of this country is shifting. Like, period, point blank, it's shifting. Here in Albuquerque, we are already that demographic shift that the rest of the country is trying to figure out. Like, we already are that. Yeah. And so dig into that, like, figure out how to be okay with that, because you live in a place that's already that. And the rest of the country is just trying to figure out how to deal, right, with a changing demographic. And so that only means you have opportunities for growth in your business. Right. More importantly, yeah, money's great, but I hope you didn't come into this business to cause harm. And you can cause harm unknowingly, right? It took me 3 realtors till I could find my house, because the 2 realtors I had at the beginning kept telling me, this is showing me houses in the neighborhood I didn't want to live in. Like, never wanted. I made it very clear when we sat down, and what do you want? What part of town do you want? I did not want to live on the far west side, 98th and Central, way where they're building new things. And the narrative was, but you'll have more, you'll get more house for your money over there. And, one of them even said, there's people like you there. Like, excuse me, right. I don't want to fight traffic. And if you're not going to listen to me, then I'm just going to go find someone else who will and show me the houses that I want to buy. And because that's a bias, like, they're trying to, I automatically was like, you're trying to redline me way over there, right? And when you look at the data, you can go to my website and actually look at where the Black community lives and where the big clusters of us are. I think it's a thing that we're getting pushed over there. So it's a big deal.
I think it's really important that you were strong enough and to be able to be like, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to find somebody that does listen to me. A lot of the times with the Vietnamese, at least speaking community, they just don't know. Yeah. So they are just like, this is what I've been put into. So
this is what I do.
This is all I can afford. This is where I can be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad that you were able to do that.
I have a lot of immigrant clients lately, and I have to, like, coach them to argue with me. And I'm like, no, like, is this where you want to live? Like, let's get in the car. We're going to drive around, because I'm not. Like, we're going to find exactly where you want to live. Like, don't just blindly trust me, because, like, we owe it to the people and the cultures who don't yet, who are coming into this country and they want to make a better life. And you owe it to make sure they don't trust you too much because, right? Like we have our
They
biases.
have to just
Right.
yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
I think that's a culture of
It's a
folks who
cultural
come-
thing. It's just be quiet, stay
stay
quiet, don't
so
make
you don't get in
noise.
trouble.
And
Yeah,
if
And
you
just
end
follow
up
the
in that
rules.
neighborhood, fantastic.
Right.
But if not, also great. And we're going to work really hard. I will
Love
say this, like the NAR, I think, is doing a really great job in terms of highlighting diversity, equity, and inclusion, making it, trickle down to the association levels and putting that initiative in the hands of us. We were nervous that we wouldn't get our committee approved, right? And our first go at getting our committee approved, there was a lot of questions, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of just, people didn't know, why do we need this? Like, and we got a lot of people saying, like, that's not a problem here. Like, that's really, we don't have that problem
New
here,
Mexico's
right?
diverse.
And I saw Kathy Olson in the chat was talking about, like, that's why we still have these meetings. Like, yes, we
Still a
do
thing.
have, and it's not a problem to say, like, realtors are bad people, so we need
No.
this committee. It's to say that, like, we are always in need of this work. We are always in need of resources. And as the world evolves, more resources are needed. So anyway, I digress. In the end, we got unanimous yeses for this committee. We were forced to face our own, okay, these are the questions. And at first, you're like, blah, why are they asking? And then you're like, no, it's cool. Like, nobody knows. So, right? So in the end, we answered the questions and everybody was so awesome about it. And every single person on our GAR board said yes to this committee, which was just, I don't know, it made me feel really proud to be a realtor.
We need this in every industry because it is
Oh, yeah.
like it is not, we're not where we need to be. And I agree. I do this work for a living, but I'll always have a job because racism ain't going nowhere. Unfortunately, I would love to be like, yay, we can get past this. I think we need this in all of the circles.
There's a lot of events and organizations and efforts out there so that if you find what your bias is, if you find, I have a bias against whatever, just give us a call. Like, we'll help you. If you find that, we have Pride Week coming up. We have an amazing transgender resource center here. We have an incredible Black community who does incredible work at anti-racism. Just you name it, we've got it.
AAPI month.
AAPI month, yes. And it's so, whatever you find, like, it's okay, and we can definitely help.
Yeah, because we're here. We ain't going nowhere.
And there's nothing wrong with you. You're a totally normal human, and so are we with our weird
comfortable
biases.
being uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's okay. Uncomfortable. Where I come from, uncomfortable means you're growing.
Yeah.
And if you're not growing, what do you do? You want to just say you got it all in the bag and you're like, I've learned everything I need to learn?
If you got this far on the panel, if you're still watching, then I'm
Yay.
pretty sure you're growing.
All right, so I guess that's about it. So, ladies, thank you so very much for your time, your expertise, and your eloquence. So, in closing, we all have Deva. Rob Hill has a question. Okay, so we'll take one more question and then we'll go to the outro. What was the question?
The upcoming town hall for legislative meetings that are actionable for folks to go to.
Oh,
that's a good
perfect question for Charla
What are the upcoming town hall or legislative action?
and Nicole, actually.
And Nicole, yeah. Nicole's been working with me on this. So one of the things that I and Nicole and a lot of people are working on right now is changing our zoning in Albuquerque. So right now, 68% of our city is comprised of R1 lots. Those of you in the realtor world know that means one lot, one home, with the very small exception of the corridors that allow for a casita, I think 1/8 of a mile or 1/4 of a mile. Very few homes are allowed. And anybody who has sold one house ever knows that everybody wishes that there was a casita in the backyard of every house. When people ask me, like, I would love a guest house, and I'm like, that's adorable. Like, you're never going to find it. Anyway, so the IDO change would allow for casitas permissively throughout this whole entire city. That doesn't include Los Ranchos or outside of the city limits, but right now just the city limits. It would allow for mother-in-law quarters or turning a house into a duplex on an R1 lot, which we see that all the time anyway, and now we could encourage people to do it and double the housing. It allows for turning all of the hotels and motels, the ones that aren't being used and that are being sold, into affordable, either owner-occupied or long-term rented affordable housing units, which would really, really help us. And then it just changes a little bit of the parking requirements for affordable housing, allowing more building and less cars. And our parking requirements are kind of excessive as it is now anyway, so lowering it by 30% really won't be a big deal. And then allowing for a little bit of a higher height restriction on some of the places that are appropriate in the city. It's a 3-step process, and we have made it through 2 steps. So we are at the last step right now. We have the last city council meeting. It should be on June 5th. It was supposed to be on the 15th of this month, but it was deferred. I'm secretly happy because we need more organization. So remember, this means more units will be a more balanced market. It will be more houses on the market to be able to allow for more affordable housing. And that obviously is going to help the folks who have been impacted by bias throughout the decades and centuries. So June 5th, we will call us, join us at ABCD. I'm definitely helping with advocacy there. We need to show up to city council. We need to invite our friends. We need to write in letters. We need to be able to tell people why we, as realtors, as people in the housing industry, as regular people who are walking around, deserve more affordable housing and deserve, and also that there's one bias at play here, is that people want to live multi-generationally in certain cultures.
Absolutely.
I think maybe all cultures, but we hear that.
That's definitely a theme we're seeing across cultures.
Yeah.
Even if it's not just your aging parents, it's the boomerang and the adult kids. Come on, y'all know y'all have some of them at your house.
And there's
it would be nice to have in a house in the backyard instead of in your house.
Yeah, and there's adult special needs kids who
Yes.
need to be close, but not necessarily in the same kitchen. And right now, we're saying it's illegal for you to be comfortable and to live in the way that you want to. So it's not like right now we're talking about, we can take our bias away and we can really reach out and help. There's nothing we can do right now.
Right.
It's illegal to help those people. So that doesn't sit well with me, and I've been working really hard. And I really encourage all of you to show up on June 5th and speak about, all you have to say is a quick, I just support the changes because we need more housing. You don't have to go into a monologue about
all the things. But if you also aren't comfortable doing public speaking, right, because that's a real thing, you can send your comments in writing.
Yeah.
You can go on Zoom, you can go in person, and you can submit them in writing.
My other organization, I'm the director of outreach for SEED, Sustainable Equitable Economic Democracy, and we're actually doing a story drive. So I don't have the link for you, David, to put in there, but I'll send out the link to ABCD's base camp. So if you join our committee, and it's a place where you can tell your story, you can put your photo, we're going to turn them in. So it's almost as good as talking. And so thanks for asking, Rob. That's great. I know I'll see you there on June 5th.
That's right. All right. David, are we good to go from the chat? All right. So.
Keep asking about ABCD.
Oh, good.
Sweet.
Let's talk about ABCD
So yeah,
then.
let me get to that. I will close out with that. So again, ladies, thank you so very much. So in closing, we all have unconscious biases. They make us who we currently are. All right. Our brain is an incredible organ that creates mental models based on efficiency, efficacy, and survival. Our experiences, our environment, and our core beliefs help shape these mental models and create our behaviors. But neuroplasticity is the ability for changing those models and behaviors, and our brain is incredibly capable at any age to create new models and behaviors. So I implore you to challenge your biases and create a better version of yourself each and every day for you, for your clients, and for your business.
Yay, that's so well said.
Thank you to the ABCD committee for all the work that went into providing this presentation. The committee meets every second Friday of the month at 1 p.m. at GAR. Please consider joining. If you are interested, please contact the committee liaison, Heather, at heather@swmls.com. Thank you to the GAR staff for their continuous support, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. I hope we'll see you at Napoli Coffee on Manal immediately following this. Go out and do great things.
Wait, really
Peace.
quick. Thank you to Deva Kalsa, who chaired this subcommittee and made this panel possible. Thank you to everyone else on that subcommittee. Amber Ortega made these beautiful slides and
gosh,
helped to
such
create
a
all
great
the
job.
meetings. And thank you to everyone else. Vinay Rogers was on that subcommittee too, and lots of work went into this. And thank you, Nicole. You have the busiest life ever, and you took
busy.
time out to come to us. So
Thank you.
Thank you, our moderator.
and thank you, Adrian, geez, for moderating and helping to put this.
It's my pleasure. All right. We'll see you there.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Oh,
There
can
is
you
a way to
save the
save
chat?
the chat.
So you go to the dot
It's-
dot dot on the
yep.
right side
Bottom right.
of the chat.